The courtroom became quiet the moment the judge looked over his glasses and read my occupation aloud. Ms. Nora Bennett, owner of Sunrise Laundry. A few people in the gallery laughed. One attorney leaned back in his chair with a smirk. My father, Grant Bennett, looked especially pleased. Your Honor, he said confidently, my daughter runs a laundromat. She has no experience managing a large estate. I didn't respond. I simply folded my hands and waited. What nobody in that room knew was that before I ever owned a laundromat, I had spent 15 years in the military managing supply operations. Across multiple overseas deployments, I had coordinated fuel, medical equipment, transportation, and emergency logistics for thousands of personnel. I had handled budgets larger than most corporations, and I had a strong feeling that my father had manipulated my late uncle's estate. Growing up, I was always the overlooked child. My younger brother, Lucas, was treated as the future of the family. Dad celebrated his average achievements, funded every failed business idea, and introduced him as the Bennett heir. When I earned scholarships, I received a polite nod. When I joined the Army, my father barely spoke to me for months. The military changed me. It taught me discipline, leadership, and accountability. In dangerous situations, mistakes had real consequences, so I learned to stay calm under pressure. I worked my way up through the ranks and eventually became a colonel. My father never attended a single promotion ceremony. Once at a dinner party, he told his friends, Nora just moved boxes for the Army. Everyone laughed, and I stayed silent because I was tired of trying to prove myself to someone who had already decided who I was. After retiring, I bought Sunrise Laundry. It was a small but profitable neighborhood business, and I genuinely enjoyed it. My father visited once, looked around at the washing machines, and said, after all those years, this is what you ended up doing? Then my Uncle Harold passed away. He had no children, and he had always treated Lucas and me equally. That's why I was shocked when the final estate documents left nearly everything to Lucas. The numbers didn't match the plans Uncle Harold had discussed with me. I hired a probate attorney, Maya Torres. She reviewed older drafts of the estate and discovered that Uncle Harold had repeatedly divided his assets almost equally between us. But during the last year and a half of his life, properties, investments, and trust interests had been quietly shifted toward Lucas through documents prepared under my father's supervision. We challenged the estate in court. Dad demanded access to my financial records and professional history, hoping to prove I was unqualified. The judge approved the request. 6 weeks later, my father's own attorney stood in court reading my military file. His voice started out confident, but it gradually changed. He read about international procurement systems, emergency supply operations, and annual budgets exceeding $12 billion. The courtroom went completely silent. Then retired General Samuel Price took the stand. He looked directly at the judge and said, if I needed someone to protect billions of dollars in critical assets, Colonel Nora Bennett would be one of the first people I would call. The judge turned toward me. Colonel Bennett? Yes, Your Honor. Across the room, my father's expression changed for the first time. He looked stunned. He hadn't even known my rank, but the biggest revelation was still coming. Maya had obtained internal emails from the estate planners. She projected them onto a screen for the court to see. One message from my father read, I do not want Nora. Controlling family assets. Lucas is the natural successor. Another email was even worse. I will not allow millions to fall into the hands of a woman who doesn't understand business. My mother covered her mouth. Lucas stared at the floor. The judge asked my father if he had written those emails. Yes, he whispered. An estate expert testified that the restructuring had created no tax advantage and no business benefit. Its only effect was reducing my inheritance and increasing Lucas's share. Then Maya asked my father 3 simple questions. Do you know your daughter's rank? No. Do you know how many people served under her command? No. Do you know your daughter at all? My father couldn't answer. He looked down at the military evaluations in front of him, reading the life he had ignored for decades. His hands began to shake. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were filled with tears. 3 weeks later, the court threw out the manipulated transfers and restored my uncle's original equal distribution. Lucas came to my laundromat afterward and admitted that our father's favoritism had made him entitled and afraid of failure. Months later, my father asked to see me during his rehabilitation. He apologized for every ceremony he had missed, every achievement he had dismissed, and every year he had spent underestimating me. I didn't forgive him immediately. But for the first time in my life, I listened to an apology that sounded sincere. I used part of my inheritance to create a foundation that helps veterans build civilian careers. And I kept Sunrise Laundry. That little business reminds me every day that honest work never needs a fancy title. The people in that courtroom laughed because they saw washing machines instead of strength. But by the end of the trial, they learned something important. The smallest business in the room belonged to the only person there who had already managed billions and never needed to belittle anyone to prove her worth.